We became the cause. And yet it would be so much better if we could do it that way. Does that mean if you become more tolerant with other countries and talk to them and trade with them, does that mean you endorse what they do? No, certainly not. But that's the way it is on personal liberty too. You know, if another country has problems internally, for us to go in there and settle those problems, I think is wrong. If another country made up a bunch of bad people and they start using violence against us, then we have an obligation to retaliate. But the line should be sharply drawn. But this is the same way it is with individuals. If we recognize that individuals have a right to their life and liberty, what you're also recognizing is that everyone has a right to do dumb stuff. For those who take their liberty and abuse it and do the dumb things and hurt themselves, abuse their bodies or their minds or their religious values, if they don't hurt other people, there's one thing for sure, that is hardly the authority that's going to improve on personal behavior, and they shouldn't even try. There's obvious limitations. Individuals can't hurt their neighbors. They can't steal, and they can't murder, and they have to follow their contracts and follow their promises. Yeah, what do we have now? We have a government today that abuses our property rights, interferes with all our contracts. They have become the arch counterfeiter of the world, and they are using force and intimidating every economic transaction that we have. The government is doing exactly opposite of what they're supposed to be doing in a free society, and that is protect against violence, not to be the perpetrator of the violence. Believe in personal liberty, well, we would probably end up with an opinion about the drug war. You know, drugs are bad; they're horrible. I detest them. The illegal drugs are especially bad and harmful. But prescription drugs, they probably kill a lot more people than the illegal drugs do. Not whether drugs are dangerous or not. The question is who should be the monitor? Should it be you yourself on your own body? It should be your parents, your friends, and your neighbors, and your church, and your doctor. Should they be helping, or should it be some DEA agent that will catch some teenager using drugs for the first time and he gets thrown in jail and turns him into a monster? And then we draw up laws. We draw up laws in Washington that take away all the authority from the states. The federal government comes in and overrules the state laws, and then put people in prison. If they've been caught 3 times in nonviolent crimes, they get put in prison for life, and there's no recourse. The judges can't even change it. We take sick people who've used marijuana for health reasons, and we put them in prison. The whole thing is nuts. We have spent hundreds of billions of dollars in doing this, and it's time the conservatives and libertarians and constitutionalists got together and decided repeal prohibition. The other night I was on Bill Maher's show. Anybody ever hear Bill Maher? That subject came up, and of course that audience was a little more sympathetic than the average Republican audience. And he was saying, yeah, why don't we do this and do like Roosevelt did, legalize alcohol, and then we can tax it. And it didn't come across real clear on my statement, but it was clearly said. It wasn't just clearly heard. I said, yeah, that's okay with me, but I wouldn't tax it. And it's not because I want marijuana or those things to be better treated than anything else. It sort of fits into the position, no taxes on anything, no income tax. We don't need taxes on the seeds. Perfect world, but just think of how much harm is done with distortion of religious values and philosophic values. That's had literally killed hundreds of millions of people. And yet we wouldn't think of prior restraint in teaching and reading and writing a newspaper some of these ideas. And yet we have accepted the notion that the federal government can regulate every single thing that we put into our mouth or what we smoke. And that, once again, I can't emphasize it more, but I think so many of these substances are dangerous. But I don't want to regulate what you read, and I don't want to regulate the internet. And the internet is abused, and there's a lot of trash out there, but there's techniques and technologies and responsibilities. And it's just the difference between what happens in a free society versus an authoritarian society. And we have become too complacent, and we have accepted the idea that some clown up in Washington can be the one to design what is good and bad for us. The whole idea that today, that if there's a couple people in here, maybe each audience, there's always somebody who might like the idea of drinking raw milk, and the federal government regulates it and tells you whether or not you can do it or not. So much, is it good for you, is it helpful, or is it bad for you, is it dangerous? I'm sure some raw milk is dangerous, and some raw milk can be good. And and all things being equal, you know, there's danger just in everything. The question is who should be doing this? Who in thunder ever thought the federal government should be regulating the transportation of raw milk, you know, between states and being sold in a retail manner? That is it's just, you can go on and on about responsibility. You know, we talk a lot about the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is very, very important. Some people said it wasn't made for hunting. It wasn't written for hunting. It was written for protection, sometimes even protection against abusive government. And during the Constitutional Convention about whether or not we should have a Bill of Rights, and some thought it was very necessary, and we finally got it. But you know, in some ways it could have been simplified. You know, if you have a system of government and strong rules about property rights, you really probably don't need a Second Amendment. It's the idea of property. Why? And I think the founders actually thought about that a lot. I mean, they weren't worried about whether you had a shotgun to shoot rabbits. They were worried about whether you had guns and whether you were able to have voluntary militias within each state is what they were talking about. But just owning property should allow us to own and do things with our own property. Today, some of us still believe that we own our own property. And they say, are we moving, they ask me on TV a lot lately, are we going to be socialized? Are we moving toward socialism? Well, yes, we're moving in that direction, but we're probably not going to have total ownership. But it doesn't matter. They have total control. Under fascism, they don't take the deed and title. They just have total control. But if you own any raw land and you want to develop it, or if you want to drain a ditch or build a big pond, can you do it without permission? Where do you go? You have to go to the local people, the city, the county, the state, the federal government, and then maybe you can use your land the way you want to. And also you have to pay rent, and that's called taxes. If you don't pay that, you lose your land, and the taxes are very high and they're very abusive. So in many ways we kid ourselves to think that we really are the owners of the land and the owners of the big business. And the unfortunate thing I think has happened to us is that business people are so responsible for the mess that we're in. This small businessman, and when I think of all the people I've seen in the last year or two, one thing I have firmly been convinced of, that if we are, and I hope we do, and expect that we will, save this country, it won't be coming from the wealthy, big business, international corporations and people who have been sucked into the military-industrial complex and high union wage costs. They will not. They depend on the government. It will come from the people who really care and understand, that seem not to have that much material gain. The most gain, the gain that they see is the right and the privilege and the great satisfaction of knowing it is my life and I can do with it what I want.